G'day, my name's Phil Wickins, I'm a cast master teacher and I'm here to give you another delve in for 12 min. Plus, it's my birthday. Happy birthday. Let's get rid of this. Okay. So, this session we're going to talk all about repetition. Okay, now a very simple programming construct along with selection and sequence. So repetition, otherwise known as looping. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is. Let's go into detail on it and let's look at how we can teach progression in this and make sure that we're giving children the best possible knowledge of this particular concept. So, where we would start is looking at repetition and gather all the vocabulary to do with that. You could say, oh well, the word again. You could say step by step by step, literally repeating words. You could look at the word loop and just gather all of their different ideas as to what repetition actually means, what it looks like. Then you could go on to acting it out, a bit of role play. Let's do some repeat after me. You could use music, do it in a canon. The repetition is sort of staggered, make it sound beautiful. You could do Simon Says, you know, when to repeat, when not to repeat. And then you could move on to pictorially demonstrating it. Now this is where I'd probably move into the algorithms. Now please, if you don't know algorithms, please watch my previous video on algorithms. Just so you know what I'm talking about, you know the idea behind that. I did touch a little bit on repetition in that video and in the selection video as well, but let's break it right down in this section. So in an algorithm, you could have a loop shown by your decision diamond. You could have flow lines from your decision diamond if it's constantly checking that criteria, or any kind of loop within an algorithm. If you were doing it on paper, you were drawing your algorithm, you might want to specify how many times that is looped. For instance, got to stop saying for example. For instance, if you were doing the hokey cokey and it said left leg in, left leg out, in, out, you're actually doing that 3 times. So you could have a flow line there with times 3 on it. You could then talk about, if you're in Key Stage 1, you could talk about bebots, where you would go step forward, step forward, step forward, turn left. Okay, well, 3 step forwards there. Could I just say step forward, repeat 3 times, or loop 3 times, or step 3 times? Keep the vocabulary nice and simple, but make sure they know they're introduced to the word repetition or looping as well. So, once you've looked at that kind of language, vocabulary, the visual aspect, the role-playing, then you can move on to talk about the different types of repetition that you would have. A single repeat, and then you would probably move on to looking at repeat n number of times. Here is a demonstration that I've set up that you could give to your children. Now, this is within Scratch, and it's looking at the repeat n number of times block within the control section of Scratch. Now, as you can see, I've set up different keys to trigger off these 3 different parts. And each of them, well, I would give this to the children and say, study this code carefully and predict what you think will happen when you press the T, for example, or the S, or the H. Now, they can see that there is movement involved and turning involved. And if they're good at maths, they might start thinking, well, the turning, that's a number of degrees, okay, and then start to think about what that shape could be that it's going to draw. But also look at the number of repeats. That will denote the number of sides that the shape has. So I'm wondering whether the children can then work out from the number of repeats we've got and the angle what the shape will look like. You could then challenge your children to make one up. Say, right, make another one of these when the letter P is pressed to make a pentagon, or the letter O to make an octagon. Can you use that repeat function accurately? You could even give them the degrees if that's too complicated and say, right, make sure you put the correct repeat in. Repeat n number of times. Following that, you could talk about the function where it says repeat forever. Now this in Scratch is particularly useful if you've got a certain criteria that is being checked over and over again, as illustrated in this example. I didn't get away from it there. Example. As illustrated here, where the sprite needs to do something when it touches the wall. Now we looked at this in the selection video. So if you've got a maze and you want the sprite to go back to the start when it touches the wall of the maze, you'd put when touching colour black, go back to the start. But it has to be asking that condition over and over and over again, constantly, as you're moving the sprite around. If it only asks it once and it's not touching the wall, the sprite won't go anywhere. So this, the forever loop, is actually quite useful in making sure that your sprite will act the way you want it to act. However, in the real world, where big people use computers and program in industry, you don't ever want to write a forever loop, a loop that will just continue forever and ever and ever. Okay, you want to steer right away from that, because the only way to get out of it is a hard reset. Okay, flicking it off at the plug. So if you think about it in Scratch, when you've got a forever loop, the only way of stopping that is to either hit the red stop button above the gaming window, or you put in something in that sprite that says that will trigger a stop all scripts. And it's literally like pulling the plug out of the wall. Now we ultimately want to steer children away from the forever loop, although absolutely use it, it's brilliant, it's really helpful. But if you've got children who are really starting to get into this, who the high ability, or even the ones who can cope with this concept, we're going to steer away from the forever loop, and we're going to go on to the conditional forever, the repeat until. Now, if you look at the repeat until block, it actually has a hexagonal insert for one of your operators to go in there. This means you can set a criteria. So that particular piece of code will repeat until a certain criteria is met. Now, ultimately, this is where you want children to be. So they're not having to do any hard resets or stop all scripts. There's literally a built-in get out of this loop, which ultimately is where they want to be if they grow up and do computing. If they grow up? Of course they're going to grow up. If they go on to do computing later on in life is what I meant. You knew what I meant. Okay, so in this model we can see there is a repeat until the sprite touches this colour, because that means they've reached the middle of the maze and they're going to go on to the next level. So we don't want that particular loop to run anymore. You could have one that says repeat until the score gets to a certain level, because that means they've finished the game. You can have repeat until the character dies and changes costume to the death costume, because that means it's the end of the game, so that forever loop will stop running. So we're trying to guide children to use the loops and repeats effectively within their programming. If the forever loop achieves their goal and they're happy with that, great. But you as a teacher now know that you can even push them even further, extend them even further into thinking about having a get out clause from that forever loop, or that loop that is constantly going round, so that you can you have the control over your code and where it's going. I really hope this has been helpful. Please let me know all of the things that you're trying and whether these are helpful for you. Give me some feedback, something I've missed, something I've got wrong, or even ideas for clips and videos that you want information on. And I will do a delve in for 12 on one of those. But until then, happy birthday and have a great day, and I'll see you at the next Delve In for 12 Min. Cheers!